Friday, everyone. Welcome back to yet another Leader Factor Live. It's a pleasure to have you with us this Friday afternoon, at least where we are. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We know we have just about every time zone that there is joining on these things, so welcome from all four corners of the earth. Tim, thank you for joining us today and taking some time
Good to be here.
to do another one of these.
Oh, I'm excited to do a live stream. This is great.
I really like these live streams. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. We've started doing these weekly, and I think we'll continue to do them as long as the response stays the way the response has been, which has been good. So first thing we would love to hear from you is, where are you joining from? Let's see if we can track down some of those time zones. Last week we were all over the place last week. I think we had a couple dozen countries maybe. There were a lot of people represented. So let us know where you're coming from. We love to see that. It's always fun.
Yeah, throw it in the chat.
Today, one of the things that we're going to be doing, we've got some announcements on the agenda, and we're going to be talking about crack yourself open. We'll share some slides with you and show you what we mean by crack yourself open. So, for those of you who have been exposed to the Leader Factor community for at least a little while, you'll know that some of what we're best known for is webinars. And we've chosen to do a November webinar. It wasn't on the calendar for a while. We were going to push to January, but the response was a little bit overwhelming. And we've decided to run another webinar for November. Bob, thanks for joining us from Edmonton. So that webinar is going to be on the 19th of November. And we're going to be talking about psychological safety and employee engagement, which comes first. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. It's a topic that I really enjoy discussing. And so hopefully we'll get some good engagement from all of you. If you haven't had a chance to register for that, you can go to leaderfactor.com and look at the webinar page. We've got Bangalore from, we've got Bangalore, Edmonton, and several others from right now, which is very cool. So thanks from India. Okay, so Tim, what are we going to talk about today, and why was this an important topic for you?
We're going to talk about cracking ourselves open. And what this means is taking the opportunity to do some pretty deep introspection and self-inventory. And the reason we want to talk about this is I want you to think for a minute about cultural transformation and creating, for example, a deeply inclusive culture and organization, which corresponds with stage one of the 4 stages of psychological safety, which is inclusion safety. But if you think about organizational or cultural transformation, it's largely an illusion. Where does it really happen? Does it happen at the institutional level? No, it doesn't. You have to go down all the way to the individual. Unless the individual begins to change and act and think differently, then we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay where we are. And so it comes down to that individual self-examination, that cracking yourself open, taking that opportunity to do that. So when was the last time that you took some time to reflect deeply and carefully about what you believe about yourself and other people, and then ask yourself, am I really living the convictions and the beliefs that I have? This is at the root of creating psychological safety in an organization. So I want to, if you don't mind, Junior, I want to read a little excerpt from the 4 stages of psychological safety that I think gets at this. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And hopefully this will cause some reflection. We have all felt the pain of rejection and reproach. At the same time, we've all done some excluding and segregating, some manipulating and controlling, some depriving and belittling, some friending and unfriending. We've all drawn racial, social, and other demographic or psychographic lines and made unjust judgments on others and treated them poorly. We know something about marginality because we've all been marginalized. We can be benevolent, compassionate, and kind. We can also be, as the Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes put it, stinking, low-down, mean. So I share that because when was the last time you took the opportunity to reflect that deeply, to crack yourself open and really subject yourself to that kind of examination of conscience, of values, of beliefs about your relationship with other people? We've all marginalized and we've all been marginalized. We've been on the giving end and we've been on the receiving end. It's a sobering, isn't it? But it can be extremely helpful. Junior, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there's some sort of disconnect between the institutional vision and the institutional mission, and then what happens in the trenches. Because if you look at the mission of almost any organization, it's going to have some element of benevolence. We want to do right by the world. We want to impact the world. We want to offer value and do these things by treating our people well, and so on and so forth. And you see these long missions and visions. But somewhere down the road, that doesn't translate all the way down into boots on the ground. So my question to you, Tim, would be, where does this disconnect happen? Why do most organizations have dissonance between, at least in some parts of the organization, what happens and what we aspire to be?
Yeah. Well, this goes back to the difference between professed values on the one hand and de facto values on the other. So think about your organization. Does your organization have values? Does it profess values? Does it have core values that it communicates, that it advertises, that it promotes to the members of the organization and says, we stand for these, right? Okay, those are professed.
Sure.
Those are official. You may put them behind glass and put them on the wall. Good for you. Are they your de facto values? Now, here's the interesting thing. Regardless of the values that you may profess, you have values. But we don't know if they are the professed values or not. But you do have values. Everyone has values. Every team has values. Every institution has values. That's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
So we have values, but are they the ones that we want to have? Are they the ones that we profess? As you said, Junior, there is often dissonance. What comes out of the dissonance? Well, what comes out of the dissonance often is cynicism. This is where employees often become jaded. They become discouraged because we're not living up to our values. There's a gap there. Yep. And often that gap can be traced back to divisions among or between us that we continue to nurture, even though we are saying that we are all about inclusion, we're all about being connected, we're all about feeling accepted and having a sense of belonging, but we're often not living that.
Yeah.
Right? So
part of the reason
I want to read one. Yeah. Is my mic coming through okay? So I'm going to read one more thing from the book that hopefully will get your attention. As humans, we look for loyalties to attach to. Out of our attachments emerge our differences. So think about that for a minute. This is where the differences come from our attachments. Out of our differences emerge our divisions. Out of our divisions emerge our classes, ranks, and stations. And it is out of those spaces between us that the comparisons begin. The empathy flees, the fear and envy emerge, the conflicts arise, the antagonisms gestate, the destructive instincts and impulses for abuse and cruelty arise. In the spirit of our bigotry, we invent dogmas to justify the ways we torment each other. Ironically, now think about this. Ironically, in our digital age, we connect and feel alone. We compare and feel inadequate. Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
there's a little food for thought there.
So, what do you think the antidote is? Is crack yourself open the antidote to a lot of what you were just saying? And in my mind, it is. And one of the reasons I brought up corporate values versus what actually happens is because I think the same is true with individuals. And I think it's a profound thought and a profound lens that there are professed values that we as individuals have, the character that we hope to have and that we would describe ourselves as if asked. But we also have de facto values in the things that we do every day. So I may think that
Yeah.
I, want to be a certain way. I may tell other people I am a certain way, but how do I actually act? How do I comport myself every single day and what comes through? And so Tim, how do you take time to crack yourself open? Are there any things that you do regularly, like personally, to
Yeah.
take this to work?
Yeah. One of the things that I do is I journal.
Mm,
That's an activity that I do every week. Journaling is a very powerful exercise to reflect, and you have to write something down. And when you're journaling, who are you writing for? You're writing for yourself, really. Now, maybe someone sometime in the future will read it, but it's an exercise. It's a personal exercise, and so you have to be pretty honest, right? We're not we're not going to embellish the truth. We're trying to understand ourselves in our current state as accurately as we can. Otherwise, it's not a helpful exercise.
yeah,
So I would say journaling is a very good practice. Number two would be solicit input from trusted friends, advisors, colleagues, family members, people that will give it to you straight. I don't think you can crack yourself open and really conduct a fearless searching personal inventory without the help of other people. We need other people in order to see ourselves clearly, because self-awareness is not easy. It's not an easy thing. And we need honest, candid feedback from people who understand us and care about us, but are willing to help us see ourselves, put a clean mirror, right? Let's clean that mirror and
yeah.
put that clean mirror in front of us. So those are two things that I do. How about you?
Oh, I really like that analogy of a clean mirror. One of the things that I like to do, I don't journal. I have trouble journaling. For whatever reason, it's difficult to do sustainably for me. But solicitation, I think, has been one of the most helpful avenues for me. And one of the people that knows me the best, that I spend the most time with, is my wife. And some of her strongest characteristics are some of my weakest. And so, one of the things that I've done over the last little while is after we'll have a social engagement or stumble into some sort of situation and we work ourselves through it, I'll ask, hey, how did I do? How did I do on one? We were having a conversation just the other day with one of the contractors that's helping us with a remodel. And I had to hold this person accountable. And one of the things that I tried to do was approach it with high accountability, but also high affiliation. And so I tried to be personable and I tried to really express how we were feeling about the situation and at the same time hold this person accountable. And it would have been one thing for me to leave that conversation and just think about it myself. How did that go? But I decided to ask my wife, hey, how did that conversation go? How did I come across? Do you think that I had the high accountability and the high affiliation? And she said, yes, I think that this went well and this went well. But one of the things that you could have done was this, this, and this. And so that's been particularly helpful for me is solicitation. And so I would encourage all of us to do that. Is if there are people that are close to us, and it doesn't have to be a significant other, it could be a coworker that's just part of the same conversation as you, right? Part
Mm-hmm.
of the same meeting. Hey, how do you feel like that
Yeah.
went? Did you think that it went well? Do you think that it went poorly? Why? What's one thing that I could tune up? And
Yeah.
I think that those are helpful conversations. So
I love
that's
that.
my answer is solicitation.
I love that, Junior. So you're making it a habit to do a debrief or a post-mortem, or as they say in the military, an after action review, but you
Yep.
actually take the time to go back and say, so how did I do? And in this case, you're asking your wife and she's giving you some good, honest feedback about that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that takes some effort, doesn't it? And it takes some
It does.
vulnerability. So
It does.
let's go back to the definition of psychological safety. An environment of rewarded vulnerability. The more psychological safety you have, then the more productive your crack yourself open session is going to be, because it's a meaningful session, right? You're going to get the unvarnished, unedited truth, but it's not going to be cruel.
Yeah.
It's going to be compassionate candor. Is there such a thing as compassionate candor? Junior, does your wife
Absolutely.
give you compassionate candor?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's just candor. No, I'm just kidding. But one of the points that I want to make about this is some people will say, well, just accept where you are, just accept who you are and pat yourself on the back and you're doing a great job. And I think that there's a time and place for that to say, yeah, you know what, I'm doing pretty well. But most of the other times and most of the other places, I think it's important to really internalize this concept and say, you know what, I'm not doing the best that I could. And that will almost always be true. 99% of the time, there will be a gap between the potential best experience that you could have conveyed and what actually happened. And to me,
Yeah.
there's a tremendous amount of positivity in that. And I don't know if that might come across as ironic, but how depressing would it be is if we thought that's it, that you're as good as you are. But to
Yeah.
me, being able to look at myself and say, you know what, there's more. There's more in there. There's distance to go. Because then if I point that out, guess what? There's something that I can do about it. And so if I just say, you know what, my communication skills, they just are what they are. That's it.
Mhm.
I just am the way that I am. And that's part of my personality. And some people might hate it and some people might love it. And just so be it. Guess
Yeah.
what? That's stasis forever, for
Yeah.
decades. If I'm
Yeah.
able to say, you know what, that's actually not good. That
Yeah.
part of that conversation didn't go well, and there's some distance to go. And I think part of the reason that we don't do that is because if it's foggy, if we allow ourselves to just be as we are, there's no criteria for evaluation and it's not as pokey, right? When we say, this is my expectation for myself and this is where I think I can be, but this is where I am, we know exactly when we fail, right?
Yeah.
And I really like that because then we can go and we can tune it up and we can improve, we can ask for the feedback. So I just wanted to point that out, that to me, when there's dissonance between where we are and where we can go, it's an optimistic, positive thing because there's something we can do about it.
It is. And who among us doesn't need to change and improve and get better?
Yeah.
But we always have two choices when it comes to change. We can change, or we can change our belief that we need to change. Those are really the only two options.
And
We can
one's
change.
easier.
Yeah. Which one's easier? You can change, or you can change your belief about your need to change. And so, which one's easier? As Junior asked the question, changing your belief about needing to change. If you tell yourself a soothing story that you don't need to change, then you're back to your state of equilibrium and stasis and you're good to go. But that's not true, because we all need to change. There's always the next step of personal improvement for us. So think about that. Think about when you're confronted with that. Should I change, or should I change my belief about my need to change? Because what does that do? That goes back to cognitive dissonance, right? If you know you need to change, that's creating cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And so humans, what do? They try to engage in dissonance reduction immediately because it's a state of dissonance that we don't like. And so we move quickly to try to change that. So if we tell ourselves a soothing story that we don't need to change, it brings back the relief. Okay, I'm fine. Good. I'm so glad. I know I'm in good shape. I don't need
Yeah.
to change. So now I'm back to that comfortable place, and I can nestle in and create my accommodation with life, and I'm good to go for a while. But
Yeah.
that's not true.
No, it's not true at
That's
all.
not true. No,
I'd
we
be
know that.
interested in hearing from those that are watching. What are some things that you have done to help increase your self-awareness, to help crack yourself open? Are there any things in particular that have been helpful to you? And so
Yeah,
far,
let us know.
want to recognize the comments that have been made in the chat across all the platforms. So for those of you on LinkedIn, you might not see the YouTube comments and vice versa, and Facebook and all this stuff going on. But welcome to Wendy and Bob. They're two of our certified trainers. So thanks for popping in, both of you. Wendy, welcome.
Oh yeah, Wendy Chase is with us. Hi, Wendy.
Yeah, let us know if there
Uh,
are any tools or any practices that you have found to be particularly helpful.
yeah, anything related to self-awareness. It's a constant battle, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
constant battle to increase self-awareness. But what
Okay.
does self-awareness do? Self-awareness helps you understand your current state accurately. And then you can think about what the future state needs to be. And then you can create the roadmap to move you from current state to future state. And this is something that we should be doing on an ongoing basis,
Yeah.
right?
So, Bob, personality and EQ testing slash
Okay.
assessments, we would
Yep.
highly agree with that. That's a big piece of what we do, and
Mhm.
I think that multi-rater feedback in an instance like this can be particularly helpful when it
Yeah.
comes to emotional intelligence. Sometimes there's some gaps. Behavioral therapy and mindfulness, I completely agree. I'm very much in line with the behavioral component of that, and that we have to translate it into action. There are things that we need to do. Okay. So, with that, want to make just a couple. We want to recognize one of the members of our community, Brandon Springle, for talking about practicing vulnerability. And I want to talk about what, well, I'll just read verbatim his comment. He says, "Today I practiced rewarding vulnerability. You may wonder what I mean by that, so let me explain. We had a new hire looking for insights on Shaw Industries and the culture. This individual made the time and engaged in an act of vulnerability by scheduling a face to face session to talk about my experience at Shaw. This act was rewarded by my part of the social exchange and giving the best insights possible, as well as committing to be a resource in the future as needed. It was an amazing exchange, and I can only hope this individual experienced the same level of inspiration as was provided to me through this interaction. Timothy R. Clark and Leader Factor have dropped an incredible gem of wisdom in teaching about the 5 words that describe psychological safety, an environment of rewarded vulnerability. How have you rewarded vulnerability in your respective space?" I really like that comment. And
Yeah.
Brandon, props to you for rewarding vulnerability. It's something that we need to do every day. And I think it helps when we call it out explicitly, at least to ourselves, to say, you know what, here's an opportunity. Someone's shown some vulnerability. What am I going to do? Am I going to reward it or am I going to punish it? Because that will dictate your relationship moving forward. It will dictate their behavior in large measure. And so I wanted
Mhm.
to call that out. So, Brandon, thank you for doing that. A couple last notes, just a reminder that we do have the webinar coming up in just a few short weeks in November, talking about employee engagement and psychological safety. Which comes first? We're going to be talking about that relationship. If you haven't had a chance to pick up the book, please do that, and leave us a review on Amazon. Follow us on LinkedIn to make sure that you stay apprised of all the things we're doing in the world of psychological safety. And I also wanted to call out the certification for November, I believe, has 3 or 4 spots left. So if you've been looking at the certification and haven't had an opportunity to do that, we've got a few seats left for November and a few seats left for December. And those are the last 2 sessions of the year. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. So, Tim, thank you again. Thank you again for doing this with us today. Any final comments from you?
Good to be with you. No, I would just reemphasize the invitation to crack yourself open and do it on a regular basis. That job is never done. That's ongoing because that's what leads to continuous improvement on a personal level.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody that's attended today and participated in the chat. Tune in to next week. We'll do this again and join us on the webinar. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.